The first experience actually came while I was working last night. I had this kind of makeshift desk set up in my room, and I was working facing the window. So my blinds were closed, but I was facing the window. And as I was sitting there and I'm typing and doing whatever I'm doing, all of a sudden I started to get this very strong perception, or I could really see that somebody was watching me, that somebody was around, because everything in my room had been very still, because, it's the early hours in the morning, not a lot is happening. But all of a sudden, I could see that it was like something in my room had shifted. Even though I wasn't looking at my room, I was looking at the window and my computer. Something had shifted. The air felt very different. It seemed heavier, or something was misplaced, or something was added to the environment. And I could perceive this. And I kind of looked over my shoulder and I looked around the room, because again, I could see that somebody had just sort of entered the scene. And it went on for about 15 minutes, just this constant kind of thing, into where finally, when I kind of glanced out of my window, because the blinds, even though the blinds were closed, they kind of stay cracked where you can kind of see outside a little bit. I had looked outside of my window, and all of a sudden I seen this big pair of eyes they were from one of the creatures that the Kalaum god uses, like one of his little, I guess, like duty men, or like one of the guys that carries out his little tasks. I was visited by one of them before, when I first started singing the NUUU, probably a couple months into it. I was sitting in my bedroom singing the NUUU, and as I was singing it, all of a sudden this giant, the way that I described it at the time, and that I could even still describe it, was like it was a giant gaseous being. It was made out of what looked like, how you see those pictures of nebulas, and you see the pictures of space, and it looks like it's got all this purple gas and particles and dust. It kind of looked like that, but in the shape of like a person. Roughly in the shape of a person. And it kind of leaned into my room and it looked at me, and it had these two big old eyes that were like giant suns. They were very white, and they were fluctuating between going large and small. And I remember it just looked at me as I was singing the NUUU, and I remember I kind of like waved at it, or I acknowledged it, and it kind of just leaned away really slowly, like, and it took off. Well, anyways, I had a dream vision following that experience, maybe a year after that experience, to where I seen that it was actually one of the agents of the Kalaum god, coming and just sort of seeing what I was up to and keeping an eye on me in certain things, maybe even sent to interfere in certain things. But again, it came around again last night outside of my windows, doing the same thing, where it kind of leans in, it's watching. So it's kind of like this watcher or whatever, this little spy person. And as soon as I seen it, it took off really quickly. What was very interesting too was the first time I had seen it, it tried to portray an image of being friendly. I didn't get any kind of ill intent at the time. I just couldn't see it, perhaps. But yeah, I didn't get any kind of ill intent the first time I had seen it, all these years ago. But this time that I had seen it, it was much darker. It didn't have these bright purple colors. It was actually much, much darker. And it almost looked like it had like fangs, or like some kind of sharp teeth. And as soon as I seen it, it almost sent a chill down my spine. I'm looking at it, but it took off. And shortly after that, again, I still had that perceivable kind of like that somebody was still in the room, but it wasn't like malevolent or even benevolent. It was just kind of a presence. All of a sudden, I could see that this reptilian came up on my left-hand side, and they had white skin. Usually the reptilians, they got green skin, or kind of like whatever, they can have whatever. But this particular one, or particular species of one, had white skin. And or maybe it was even painted, I'm not entirely sure. But it came up to me and it put its hand on my left shoulder, because it was looking into my computer. And I got this impression that it was curious, or it could see what we're doing, and it wants to get involved. So that's why it's coming forward. That's why it showed up like it's looking at the computer, because that's its focus. That's what it sees. So that was the experience that I had to share.
That's cool, Jeremy. Things are showing up, and yes, they are paying attention, aren't they? So we're getting their attention.